Rhean, Chapter 1, Blackbird. I often wake up less sure than the night before, waving off the steam, mind washing ashore. And yet here I am again, reminiscent nostalgia, hopeless romance, lost cause. All or nothing to start another hour, if for nothing else than to count the petals of a useless flower. The agony worth the details, if the sea will still have me. The last steps are harder. They certainly were that time. Everything was already decided, but there's always a doubt, a question wafting in the humidity. Without a way to predict what comes next, it takes courage to move forward. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of anything happening at all. So I stood at the altar holding Nox Aeterna, my loyal companion, my sword made from fallen feathers. She was already nearly half her former size. We worked for months to find and forge those two fragments. Nox Aeterna at her full strength would be larger than my own body from hilt to tip. Black as the night's shadow, I wore a harness more than a sheath to hold her on my back. She was glowing in dark reds. Old runes engraved on her side drew in an ancient power. The pommel still held a dull blue glow, a way to remember the loss of my sister, a candle to light through the maddening darkness. I was holding Nox Aeterna there in that cave at the top of a sacred mountain. At an altar the clergy built. They raised stones and surrounded the platform with holy water. They carved out a hole in the ceiling to let the sun and moon shine through. Only when they all aligned could I attempt to bridge the gap. I would walk to the other side. There must be a way back to you. You all right, Rhean? Doris was always the first to say something. A short man, short even by human standards, spoke up to me. He wore a simple uniform in blacks and reds with an oversized hat and an equally oversized feather sticking out of its side. All his clothing bore the crest of one of the most ambitious nations on the continent, Arstophus, a stolen name and a mistaken identity. They used iconography beyond their ken. They painted the eternal sky in the official colors, those same blacks and reds. The only text was an ancient word written in forgotten runes. It was strange that they could find those letters again. Ancient runes that were better lost to time immemorial. Then again, so should have the name Arstophus. Indeed, humans draw inspiration from strange and rare sources, an undying desire toward progress. But it is all eventually superseded by betrayal. Rhean! As I raised my sword, Doris held back the monks and my two other companions, Othil and Chronotes, two men who joined us during the journey. Othil was valley folk. He was looking to find trade routes from the other nations. Chronotes was a giant of a young man and from a major harbor. He stayed with us to avoid his father. I've got it, Doris. Don't worry. Forged from the remnants of my own blackened wings, Nox Aeterna was still fractured and struggled to summon the strength to pursue the ritual. I slammed her into the rocky base of the altar to force a reaction. Leaning onto the hilt, the jagged edge of the broken blade dug deep into the ground. Red roots grew through the stones of their monastery and into the heart of the mountain. Even incomplete, Nox Aeterna would have the power to channel the spell. I just needed to focus my thoughts. I let my vision fall onto the dim blue glow of the pommel. I could find a route through the chaos, make sense of the shadows, and find that island floating in the sky. Nox Aeterna responded to my desire with a blinding red light. She mirrored the confidence I once possessed. All that was left was to recite the old prayer. The runes along her side were burning into the mountain. My blade would illuminate the hall in a dark red brighter than anything the mortals had hence witnessed. All the monks and my two companions recoiled as a reflex. Doris and the head monk worked together to turn everyone around, shielding their eyes from my otherworldly light. Their reactions were a gentle reminder of their frail nature. I couldn't help but laugh at their efforts to comprehend my life. Looking past the sins, humans are endearing in their enduring curiosity. Are you sure it's safe? Chronotes spoke up with his back to the light. He may have been a giant of a young man, still just a boy by age alone, but he was shy for his size, unsure of the charisma in his character and his stature. I think that's why he grew out the beard. Red like the rest of his hair, it matched his personality in some way.
If you ruin another good poncho, it's coming out of your pocket.
Othil wasn't as big as Chronotes, but certainly 3 times the height of Doris. Even traveling so far from his home, he kept wearing the traditional robes of the valley folk. I imagine he thought it would aid in his talks on pacifying trade routes. He was about Doris' age and shared his interest in building reputation and fame, the politics of the century shrinking profits for all nations outside of Arstophos. He tasked himself with finding new markets for his homeland, the greed of men truly never-ending.
What's wrong with the one I'm wearing, Othil?
I shouted back at my companions, some banter to keep them distracted as the mountain's rumbling grew into a roar. By the time the ritual was done, they would surely think it an earthquake across the continent.
It's like all your others.
Othil tried to face me, covering his eyes with his hands, but flesh alone is not enough to protect mortal eyes. He instantly turned back against the pressure of my intense red light.
I'll keep that in mind,
I shouted back just as the mountain began rocking back and forth.
Come, take refuge in our shelter.
Renoski, the head monk of the clergy of Krenazerg, shouted the final order, and my companions followed her as she guided the monks down one of the halls of the cave. They had enough wit to find a good place to hide before the walls came tumbling down. I refocused my mind on the dim blue glow of the pommel once again. The color was all but snuffed out. I was almost there, and all there was left to do was wait. I let my thoughts drift to the absurdity of Othil's mercantile concerns, even in the face of death. That kind of reliability is inspiring in a way. He cared so much about something so insignificant. All those lofty goals settled into a distant dream. I let my lips find shapes they lost long, long ago. Words I hadn't heard since before the first fall. After so much time, the syllables tasted foreign on my aged tongue. The stone walls of the cave then disappeared, and I was transported to another realm. High atop Krenazerg, the same mountain where the monastery was founded. I was starstruck by what I saw. I always hoped, but never thought she would really be there for me. Someone above answered my fallen call. One of my sisters still soaring through the skies. The only one left who never surrendered to the void beyond or the deep blue below. Her master still carried the burden of life, holding up an island high above the clouds as he walked through the sea, endlessly.
Rhean?
She sung my name. It had been so long since I heard her voice. I didn't trust myself to recognize it. I could only just barely make out her silhouette against the floating landmass still dutifully held up by the old god Amonis, her eternal master. Obeir? Obeir Andruker? Her hair was long and white, and her eyes were painted in a deep blue of the sky. She wore a dress as white as her hair, with an ancient pattern on its front, her majestic white seabird, the Ben Alfin, whose form she freely took. Rhean Yadu, you're still alive? Obeir spoke with stunted surprise in her voice. As the Ben Alfin, she flew down to the cliff where I was waiting. It's been a long time. I raised my arm, but the weight of my broken blade kept my hands firmly planted. The realm would collapse if I severed the connection between my body and the holy ground. But if you're still here, then that means... Obeir returned to her more usual form and danced around the edge of that cliff. She admired my strength and then finally sat down beside me with a worried smile. I know. We were all close in that time before time, when the world below was still nothing but a vast expanse of oceans over every horizon. Before the first fall, when humanity revealed their true nature to the naive Dwolmarik, to the first of the old gods to fall, to my estranged master. Are you all right? What happened to you? Obeer rubbed my shoulders and felt where that evil villain ripped my blackened wings from my body. Honorable men who would sacrifice my soul for an ounce more of power. I can only form white scars and scales now. I tried to turn into the Blackbird who once bore my name, only to reveal old wounds across my body. No black feathers, only scars and scales. Confession saving my soul from deeper damnation. More than half demon by appearance, it suited me well. So your Blackbird, the Benakosamsa, is no more. We must make a new one for you then. Obeer stood up and looked into my eyes. I could see my own reflection and let out lifetimes of laughter. Obeer, I can't even remember what she looked like. I forgot what I looked like until your eyes showed me. The Benakosamsa is no more. I took what was left of my feathers and turned them into my new companion. I gripped Nox Aeterna tighter, to show Obeer how powerful the reflections from the monastery were. Echoes of light into the realm of our meeting answered in kind, dark red shouting out into the eternal blue sky. Well, then I'll just have to make one from what I remember. She reached for my hand, and I could understand what she wanted. Her heart was still pure. She didn't yet know the betrayal of men. Don't waste your time. I let myself relax back into that more human form. The flight of birds is a game for a gardener sage still in the sky. That isn't me anymore. Not after the fall. Besides, I like who I became and how I look now. Has it been that hard? Obeer rubbed the back of my hand and helped ease the pain of holding our meeting together. How did you know I would answer your call? I didn't. I smiled, and she shared my lack of confidence. Our kind are meant to be stewards. We live and we sacrifice in service to our masters. But our love is for our people, for the children of the old gods. Only another gardener sage can truly understand that contradictory mission, that impossible emotion. I never expected to see any of us again. Amonis maintains the peace as a wandering vanguard, but it's nothing like before. Obeer pointed to our master in the offing. He was massive, larger than the largest clouds, and he was strong, stronger than the tallest mountains. But he was so different from my master, from Dwolmarik. He performed his duty and nothing more. He didn't care for his children. There was no hate, simply indifference. You remember how it used to be. I was asking her to forgive my master. Dwolmarik could never ignore the humans living off his grace. There was no limit to what he would give to his children, but it was never enough for them. I can remember trying to find an answer in the stars, somewhere along the lines where the old gods were guided. I watched you all fall. Obeer let tears fall from the sky. For all the power of a gardener sage, we were forever bound by the will of our masters. Defiance was impossible. The fatal flaw was never realized that humans are not like us. They are not bound by words or promises or pacts or prayers. I saw them all die. I didn't mean to hurt Obeer, but my words pained her deeply. The rain quickened in kind. I could sympathize with her loss and loneliness, but it was hard not to think of her as the lucky one. She still lived in a paradise. That wasn't her fault, and none of us were to blame. Human sin contrived to defeat us. We needed to stand together. Rhean, I should have found a way to the surface. Obeer wiped her tears away and the rain stopped. A three-toned rainbow painted in brushes made from the wind moved against the clouds and built a bridge from her floating island home to the monastery on the cliff. Why would you willingly risk it all? I understand why you stayed on Chukari, and I would have done the same if it were Arstafa still in the sky. I learned to survive, but those lessons are nowhere near worth their price. I shook my head and tried to refocus my thoughts. I stared into Obeer's endlessly blue eyes. I showed her that dull blue ever so slightly glowing on the pommel of Nox Aeterna. We came to the monastery for a reason. I needed to explain it all to Obeer while I still had the strength to hold my broken blade. There was work to be done. Nox Aeterna and her missing fragments were yet to be reforged. You're losing control. What's wrong, Rhean? Why did you call me here? Obeer let her stark blue eyes rise into the cracks in the sky. Red bolts of lightning pierced the clouds and ran as roots through the earth. They took the same shapes as my white scars and scales. Your black-winged blade is missing feathers. Doris wants to make the world of men worthy of the gardener sage songs. He told me some like him have learned of what used to be and want to bring paradise to the world below. He promised to show me how to summon you if I joined him. How could I not? I knew my words would raise more questions than they answered, but I was losing my grip on Nox Aeterna. The emotions were too vivid. The last of my sisters was still alive. And now I need your help to fill in the gaps. Anything for my sister. Obeer stood in front of me and reached out to support my sword with me. Together, we brought balance to that unstable realm. It smelled like her home. The gardens and the trees, the water and the birds, the humans yet to learn how to struggle and survive. I could hear them worshipping her master, Amonis, the last of the old gods. Thank you, Obeer. I needed more from my sister, but I first needed her trust. So, let's begin with something simple. Who is Doris? She laughed, and we found the old songs in each other's eyes. A new friend who found me in a place the humans call Marishtun. It's not often humans impress me, but he sure did. That man even got me to take on 2 companions. I can hardly believe it myself. I laughed, and Obeer shared that happiness with her soft smile. Tell me about them.